So welcome to the episode. We've got John Clayton here. Hiya, John. How are you?
I'm really well, Helen. It's great to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation to be a guest on the show.
You're more than welcome. I mean, we actually found out that we lived in the same hometown, didn't we, at some point? And we ended up on each other's podcasts. And this is how a conversation happens. Literally starts with a conversation, doesn't it? Um,
Absolutely.
so, yeah.
Mm.
So, do you want to tell everyone, give us a quick intro as to who you are and who you help?
Sure. So, my name is John Clayton. I'm originally from the world of architecture. I originally trained as an architectural technologist and was taught that the devil is in the detail. But since 2023, I've been applying that attention to detail to podcast production. I launched a weekly podcast called Architecture Business Club, where we interview guests that share their experiences and expertise to help architects and other designers to build better businesses. And I now help service based businesses, particularly those who do complex work like architects, to share the stories of what they do and why they do it through podcasting and video content so that they can stand out from the crowd, they can build trust quicker,
Yes.
and they can attract more of their ideal clients.
Well, that is what it's kind of all about. And I think you hit the nail on the head of build trust. And that is what is lacking in the online world right now. We get people in our sphere, our network, our ecosystem, and then we go straight to convert. Like, buy my stuff, book a call. Like, why are they not booking a call? I'm like, I don't know. What are you doing between A and B? Like, if we're missing that building trust out, it's huge. And one of the fastest ways to build trust is to hear and see you and to become known for the result that you deliver. So a podcast or video or any kind of like face-to-face is a great tool to have. And I think more so in the technical industry, because sometimes just as we get too technical in the weeds of it and people can't see your audience can't see you as a person and get to see what it's like working with you. So it's genius. I think this is amazing. So yeah, fantastic. So you've gone from kind of being at the opposite end of the scale of not really wanting to get visible to having like a 5-star podcast with 10,000 followers on it and listeners, and it's just amazing. So tell me, go back to the beginning. What thoughts did you have that kind of kept you from kind of putting yourself out there and getting visible?
Oh, lots of negative thoughts, really. Things like, who am I to show up this way? Who am I to post a video or a podcast and talk about this thing? I'm worried about, well, what will people think of me? There's that gremlin in the back of your mind that's saying, well, what if I fail? What if some people don't like me? What if people are unkind? Or you hear these stories, don't you, in the tabloids about people getting trolled. You think, geez, what's going to happen? Like if I post something online and or I show up somewhere and it's a bit rubbish and people don't like me. So I had all of those common fears, those fears of showing up, being visible, a fear of being on camera. I've had a lifelong struggle managing perfectionism and imposter syndrome. So yeah, there was a lot going on there that was holding me back.
Yeah. And really, all of that perfectionism, lack of visibility, um, worried about what people are going to think, everything that you mentioned, I would hazard a guess like 100% of my audience. And I too have like had some of those thoughts. So it's
Mm.
very relatable, it's very common. And I think a lot of people can empathize with that. So, what did you think was going to happen if you did all that? What was like your particular flavor of catastrophization of like if you did all that, what was going to be the worst case?
I think one of the things was just that I would look foolish, that I would look a bit silly or foolish in front of my peers, my family and friends, connections. That if I was putting myself out there a bit more, and I suppose that was more about online connections, really,
Mm,
less than in person. I was more worried about, if I start posting online on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, and then particularly like doing something like video and podcasting, am I going to get some negative comments as well. So it was kind of that combination of worrying about looking a bit foolish and also being disliked.
Yeah, because we do want to be liked, but the stats are, I think, is it 1 in 5 or 1 in 8 people won't like you? So like the stats are like, that's hard fact. That's just like statistical fact. So then we've got this really unhelpful thought that it sounds lovely to have everyone like you and everyone like share your point of view, but the reality is it's not going to, and nor should we want to either, because then we're pretty much in a dictatorship. Like, if that's the, like, think like me, agree with me, and that's the only thing you can do, we might as well be in like a communist country or something. So when you think of it like that, it just doesn't make sense. But yet we have that innate, right back to like tribal brain 20 million years ago. If you weren't liked, you were out, you were ostracized, and then that would mean big risk. People died when they were like out on their own. They didn't survive very long. So we've still got that like tribal kind of 20 million year old brain that we're fighting against. So you mentioned about feeling foolish or looking foolish and like really like negative stuff happening. Like, did any of it actually happen? Like, what did happen when you finally sort of started to put yourself out there?
Um, None of it happened. So,
Which
in
is,
fact, it was quite the opposite.
yeah,
Actually, the people that did make the effort to leave a comment or get in touch or send me a message, it was overwhelmingly positive. It was because that they'd listened to the podcast and they found it really helpful. They wanted to reach out and say thank you or share some of the insights that they'd got from it. Um, I haven't really had any negative feedback from anybody. I mean, I'm not naive enough to think that there isn't somebody out there in the world that might have listened to an episode or read one of my social media posts and thought that's a load of rubbish. I don't
yeah,
agree with that, or I don't particularly like that. But none of those people have bothered to take the effort. They can't have felt that strongly about it to have reached out to me. So
yeah.
there really hasn't been anything like that.
No, so
Just
the worst fears actually were, it was completely the opposite.
mm,
Yeah, and actually we never go there, do we? We never go, what if it's amazing and people really like it and find it valuable? I mean, imagine if that was the one thing you took from this podcast as a listener and you just shifted that and you were like, what if this is super valuable and I'm holding it back?
yeah.
And that doesn't feel very good. Well, I'm going to just start doing it for my audience, and I'm going to get over my kind of feelings of discomfort, and I'm just going to have a go and see what's possible, because we don't know. We're living in our own brains, which are risk managed, and of course they're going to come up with the most creative situation of how bad it is. But if you go and put that work to, like, what if it goes really fucking well? Like, what would
Yeah.
that look like? Let's go and create that. Oh no, absolutely not possible. But actually, as you've just gone and said, often it is never ever as bad as what we think. So well done for doing that. So you've gone there and put yourself out there. Can you remember how that changed? Like, what were the kind of fundamental steps, or the possibly the turning point where you thought, "Do you know what, I'm just going to do it"? What did you have to think and do to get yourself to go and actually start putting things out there?
There was a bit of a lead up, but there was a turning point. So there was a few things that, with hindsight, um, I had things going on personally and things like that that I'd got to a point where I was carrying a bit of weight, I think, on my shoulders, and I hadn't realised it. I'd previously tried to do some content creation and to put myself out there a little bit more to try and build my personal brand and, you know, publish YouTube videos. And at the time, it hadn't worked, and I wasn't in the right place to be able to do it.
Hmm.
And then going back to 2023, I'd got to that place where I was just feeling a lot better about things generally. So I was in a better place to be able to do something that was going to push me a little bit outside of my comfort zone. And then what happened was I went to a conference and I met a guy at a conference called Bob Gentle. And Bob was or is a top rated podcaster. And he's created a lovely business where he helps people to build, market, and monetize their personal brands so that they can build businesses that they really love. And I'd seen his face online, like all over, like he was really visible. And then when I went to this conference, I saw him sat drinking a coffee, and I thought, I know this guy. I'm going to go and talk to him because I'd seen his face everywhere online. And I
That's
think we,
brand right there, isn't it?
yeah,
That's
yeah. So
credibility. Yeah, yeah.
that was
Walking in
his,
the street and you're like, I know you, and I associate you with that result, like
yeah,
for you, it was the podcasting. Yeah,
yeah. So
amazing.
he'd that was his personal brand at work. And I went over, we had a quick chat, and then we decided to have a follow up coffee after the conference, on Zoom. And it turns out that Bob was he's a lifelong introvert. He had really struggled with all of these same challenges that we've been discussing, and all of those feelings that I'd been experiencing myself, that kind of fear of being visible and not being good enough, imposter syndrome, all of those things. And during that conversation, he shared with me a couple of tips that had really helped him, and they really helped me too.
Yeah, do you
Um,
want to go into them?
yeah, so one of those, it actually relates to what you shared earlier in the conversation about the statistics around how many people may like you in a typical audience. And his advice was that in most cases that he'd found that you could split most audiences into thirds, so that you'd have one third of them that wouldn't really like you, that you're not going to be their cup of tea. There was another third that didn't really care either way about you.
Yeah,
But the last third, that they loved you. They would love who you are, what you're about, and those are your people. So he said that that is who you show up for. Like,
yeah,
show up for those people that are your people, that third, the last third, and don't worry about the other two thirds, because the truth of it is that you're never going to be liked by everybody. So actually, that
that's a better
really,
thought, actually, isn't it? To have instead of like, what if no one likes me? Well, look, it's more realistic that not
mm,
everyone is going to like you, and actually, that's okay, isn't it?
it's an acceptance. It's
Yeah,
coming to an acceptance that you cannot please everybody, and actually you wouldn't want to, because if you try to appeal to everyone, you're going to appeal to nobody. Like you are going to be so, like, particularly with content, your social media, it's going to be so vanilla and so watered
mm,
down that your personality is not going to come across, and people are really going to struggle to connect with you. So that was one of the things that he shared.
oh God,
And
yeah.
the other thing, the other thing that he shared was that you don't have to show up as the expert, that you can show up
This is
as the
amazing.
student. Or another way to word that would be like, you don't have to be the guru, you could be the guide. So it's a little bit like, instead of trying to use like a Star Wars analogy, so instead of you trying to be like Luke Skywalker, like the hero of the story, you're trying to be more of like the Yoda. So you're the
Okay,
sort of helpful guide that helps and supports people. But that reframing really helps, because my imposter syndrome had been holding me back, because I'd felt like, well, if I'm going to show up and share anything of value, that means that I have to profess to be some kind of guru or expert in this thing. Whereas actually, there's a very different way you can go about it. You can just ask curious questions. You can shine the spotlight on other people. You can say, I'm interested in this thing. Like, I want to learn more about it, and I'm going to share that journey with you. So I want to learn more about, I don't know, like whatever it could be, like, I don't know, sales. Like,
yeah,
you could show up on LinkedIn and talk about sales from a position of, actually, I know I'm not the world's best salesperson, but I want to improve what I'm doing, and I want to share that knowledge with other people that are going to read and digest this content. And then what happens is there's this effect where over time that's what people associate you with, and then they're the ones that decide that you're the expert. Whenever they then think of sales, they're like, oh, John's the, Helen's the
yeah,
salesperson or
yeah,
whatever. So, and that actually influenced the approach with the podcast. One of the reasons that I decided to launch a podcast that was primarily interview based was that it allows you to shine the spotlight on other people. So whilst you are there showing up in every single episode, you're pushing the attention onto the guest.
Oh my God,
But
this is gold, John. This is amazing. This is so good. Immediately, I don't know if it's your tone of voice or what, but I feel immediate calm come over. You've got a calming effect. But like, look at that whole like, there's a third of you don't even worry about them. There's a third that kind of a bit don't worry about them. Just focus on the third that I think what you're doing is amazing, and they're your people. Write content for them. Think about them. Like when you do anything for them, weight off your shoulders. Then show up as the guide, and that's all your job is to guide them through something. You don't have to have all the answers. It's impossible for you to have all the answers. Like again, it's just like a layer of
a
like
relief.
pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is amazing. What's the third thing?
Oh, the third thing. I do. Yeah. What I'm trying to think if there was something else that I wanted to share actually. Although we might kind of pick that up later. Those were the two main things that I got from
Two main, yeah,
the two main points from that particular conversation that I wanted to share.
perfect. Oh God, John, thank you for sharing that. That in itself, I think it's going to be really valuable for our audience.
Mm. Oh, good. I'm glad.
So, this is a really good starting point for people. How did you make a start of actually getting visible? What were the physical steps after you'd sorted out your thoughts and that took some pressure off and you started to make some forward movement? What did you actually do?
That's a great question. I mean, to begin with, for me, it was about there was a lot of preparation that I did, and maybe that's partly because of the perfectionism. But in terms of helping the listeners and the viewers of this episode to help get started, I mean, I think it's one of the things is just getting clear on who it is that you're wanting to serve and connect with. So I think that in terms of being more visible, that it's a lot easier to stand out if you have a very clear niche. So I did some work on that to think about, well, who was it that I wanted to connect with and why? What was the reason why I wanted to do that? So my backstory really was that I'd struggled to make it work as a sole practitioner in architecture. I'd found it challenging and there was a lot I didn't know about running a business. And that was one of the motivations for launching the Architecture Business Club podcast that I did a couple of years ago. So I would say get really clear on the niche. And for example, I mean, if we were to take, say, an architecture practice, rather than positioning yourself as, well, we are architects, you could be much more specific. You could say, well, we specialize in retrofit office refurbishments and low energy home design. In the case of, say, a copywriter, rather than just say, I'm a copywriter, like I write copy, I do that sort of thing. You could be really specific with that and say, I write engaging web copy for service-based businesses that struggle to explain what they do.
Yeah.
So that would be something I would say. If you're not clear on that already, get clear on that. Become a person of value. So you can do that by being a helpful person, create content, whether that is a blog, social media post, videos, podcasts, to help people that they would find valuable. And I would say start with the medium that you're most likely to be able to be consistent with based on your abilities and resources and how comfortable you are with it. Because if you come out of the gate saying, I'm going to focus on video because I attended this webinar and I heard that it has to all be a video first approach now.
Yeah.
But actually inside you're like so nervous about it and it's so far a stretch from where you are now to where you want to be, like you're not going to be consistent with it.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, think about the type of content that you could do. Maybe you do something that's a little bit out of your comfort zone, but don't try and do something that's just like so far away from where you are now, because you won't be able to maintain it. You won't be able to build it into a habit.
Yeah.
And I would say to engage with people as well. Like, you've got to start talking about it. If you want to be more visible, you need to start having more conversations. You need to start looking for opportunities to meet other people. So that might be
Yeah.
joining industry groups. It might be going to networking events. It might be looking for opportunities to be a guest on a podcast to talk about what you do.
Yeah.
Um, and it doesn't have to be in that sort of sleazy used car salesman sort of way. Think about just a really simple introduction that you could make. Like, often it gets called like an elevator pitch,
Yeah.
but just a really simple introduction of like who you are, who you help, how you do that.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there's probably lots of frameworks that you could find online that would help you to be able to craft that. Actually, one in particular that's pretty good. If you haven't read it already, Donald Miller. He has a really great book called, I think it's Building Your Story Brand. If you just
Building.
Google Story
Yeah.
Brand by Donald
Yeah.
Miller, there's some really good content there to help you craft that.
Really good. This is amazing. This is so good. And actually, one of my clients was struggling with this,
Mm,
and I said, "What's the least objectionable thing?" So you want to go and do lives, but doing lives right now is just like over here, step too far. So
mm,
what could you do? And she was like, "Well, I could be a guest on someone's." So she went off to try and find that, and that was a bit much to do live. So we did pre-recording stuff. She did that a couple of times, and then she was like, "Why am I faffing around pre-recording it? I could just go live." But
yeah,
before we did that, she recorded herself on a phone, like, and then just deleted it. Just the act of like recording it, saying whatever, and even to the point where you're like, oh no, no, not that last bit, that shit. Like whatever it was, taking her past that, resetting it, and then she'd just delete it, and it's fine because it doesn't matter. And as
yeah.
soon as she did that, like six
That's a
times,
brilliant
she was like,
idea.
I actually don't know what I'm. Why am I not doing this live? And I'm like, yeah, why not? Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I think for beginners, I would say pick one small thing that would help you to be a little bit more visible tomorrow than today. And I would pick something that's just slightly outside of your comfort zone, something you've not been doing already. So it could be as simple as like, if you're feeling too uncomfortable to start posting on LinkedIn, for example, you could start by commenting on other people's posts. If you were still feeling a little uncomfortable about posting a selfie, you could take some selfies on your phone when you're out and about, walking the dog, or at home when nobody's watching, to get comfortable with it. And the trick is to do it enough times to be consistent doing that thing,
yeah,
so it normalizes that behavior, so that thing that previously felt uncomfortable, outside of your comfort zone, now it feels normal. And then when it feels normal, you can pick the next thing to try.
yeah,
You can move on to the next thing. So it is really about that kind of practice and normalization, like in the case of podcasting. So one of the things with that was that prior to the first episode getting published, there had been a practice interview that I did with a friend, where I recorded a trailer, which was
yeah.
just like a little 90-second recording. And then we had 3 full interviews that were completely finished, that were ready to publish on day one. And there was, I think, at least another 2 interviews that had been done. So actually, by the day of the podcast going live, I'd already done like 5 or 6 interviews.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it didn't carry the same weight, did it, as it did
Mm.
before? This is amazing, John. So you've given us a couple of different shifts in the mindset. You've also given us a starting point, which is fantastic. So then just let's wrap up and finish off with how's all this affected you and your business? What happens now? Because you did all that hard stuff back then. What are you enjoying now because you did the hard stuff back then?
So it's a lot easier to show up online. So
Yeah,
I used to overthink social media posts and rarely be able to show my face. Now I can show up without thinking about it on social media, on interviews, YouTube videos, that sort of thing. So that's been really, really good. And that's great for just allowing you to remain front of mind with your audience and those potential customers that are out there.
great.
Audience building. So the podcast has been growing month on month. We've had lots of 5-star reviews. We've had, I think, we've had listeners from over 100 countries. We've had over, I think, 13,000 downloads and counting. I regularly get messages of thanks, and I get lots of connection requests from listeners of the show. So that's been really good for building a bigger network. Awards. So I was nominated for a big industry award. It was an architecture industry award last year. So I was one of the finalists at this glitzy London event. And actually, it's given me the confidence to enter awards. I never would have done that before.
Wouldn't it
I
be
never
really
would have.
on your radar, would it?
It
No.
wouldn't have been on my radar. Whereas now I think, yeah, actually, I could definitely win that. Yeah, so that's something that I've been able to do. Public
Amazing.
speaking. So
This
I've
is
been,
so good.
yeah. So to be able to speak on other podcasts and live streams, and last November, I overcame like probably my biggest fear of public speaking by speaking at the UK's leading and largest construction industry expo down in London. So it was at London Build 2024. They have something like 35,000 attendees over the 2 days, and I wasn't on the main stage. Like, you're not going to start on the main stage, but we were on one of the stages, and we had a full house. There was about 80 to 90 people there for the talk. And now that I've done that, that has unlocked other opportunities that I would have seen them before.
Yeah.
Whereas now, like, having that tool, that ability to be able to go and talk at an event is a really powerful way to get in front of a big room of people and to really quickly build that know, like, and trust in person. So that is something that's amazing. There's also been opportunities for collaborations and partnerships with other businesses, invitations to collaborate on workshops and to set up like affiliate arrangements with them, and also new revenue opportunities now. So this is what I'm really, really excited about now, is that having done this podcast, I was invited to produce somebody else's podcast, which
Wow.
we're just finalizing the details, but that should be beginning within the next 2 months. So those new skills and experiences that I've acquired over the last 18 months by pushing outside of my comfort zone, that can now be packaged into lucrative high ticket services that have the potential to provide ongoing monthly revenue. And as I say, I'm just about to secure my first corporate client with a podcast production package that's going to be worth 5 figures this year, with the potential to
Amazing.
be renewed year on year. So I'm really excited about that.
Oh my God, John, I can't keep up. But like, you can see it like more people, visibility, building trust, synergy expert, all these opportunities explode, boomf, and then that for your clients. So good. This is amazing. So thank you so much for coming on and telling us that whole journey from like where you were to where you are now and what you've been able to do. Tell us, where can we find you?
The best place to connect with me is on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So if you search for me, Mr. John Clayton, so perhaps you might be able to put a link to my profile in the show notes, and then people can find me
We
that way.
we will do that, and then you can just send John a DM, and you can see him on there as well, and hang out in his world, and we'll go from there. So thank you so much. We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to Making Sales Simple, a podcast by Helen Tebay, the sales lady. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and follow me on Spotify for more.